Hey, hi everyone. My name is Paula. While I present everybody here, could you let me know if you listen to me correctly in the chat? Just say yes or no, please. So as I said, my name is Paula. I work at Ironhack in the marketing department, and I work in the webinars and community squad. So today we are here because we're going to be talking about intro to design thinking process with two of our teachers, Rafael and Milan. And basically, we're going to be doing a little bit of a theoretical and also like a practical way of understanding this. If you don't know what Ironhack is a tech school, and we are based in 9 different campuses around the world, plus remote. And we do bootcamps in UX, UI design, web development, and data analytics. And today I have with me two teachers from the Berlin campus. That's right. And I'm based in Barcelona, for example. So it will be cool to know from where you are watching us. So I saw that there are people from New York, Madrid, Lisbon, but please let us know where you're watching us from. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves a little bit more so you can understand what they do and what they do at Ironhack, and then we're gonna start already with the presentation. Before that, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of some tips to work in Crowdcast. So I see that you already know how to use the chat, but please leave the comments in the Ask a Question menu. Down below, you can see Ask a Question. Because since we are so many in the webinar today, if you put a question in the chat, we might lose it, or we might like not see it or not reply to it. So if you have a question, make sure to put it in the Ask a Question. Rafael will answer them while Milan is explaining everything. And at the end of the webinar, we'll make sure to leave some time to also reply to some questions. So don't worry about it, okay? And now I'll leave it up to you guys. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Paula. All right, so you already heard I'm Milan, and I teach bootcamp for UX UI design here in Berlin at Ironhack. I've been doing this for longer than I thought I'm gonna, since last year in June. And I like doing this, and I'm really a strong believer in design thinking process, which I hope that I'm gonna be able to prove. And this is Rafa, and he is my former student. And maybe you can tell a few words.
Yeah, I did the bootcamp in March. Since then, I'm here living in Berlin, so I decided to do the bootcamp, and now I'm one of the TAs, the teacher assistants of this cohort. So I help Milan and the other TAs with this group teaching things about UX and UI here in Berlin.
So you see, thank you, Rafa. You see, we're quite man of few words. Not really. Maybe he is, I'm not. All right, so thank you for being here. I'm actually gonna start already. I'm a strong believer in punctuality, which is maybe why I'm living in Germany. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Just a second. Cool. I think that you can see my screen, so we can start. As you know, we're going to be talking about design thinking, but also to be actually able to understand what this is, we're going to talk a little bit about UX design and also about user-centered design, without which we cannot really understand why design thinking is so important and crucial for this. So we're going to talk about like a little bit about user experience, about design thinking, about user-centered design, and how we do this user-centered design with user research. So what's a user experience? It's a process of enhancing customer satisfaction. The customers or users are supposed to be able to really use the product easily and with pleasure. So mostly when we teach design thinking process, and what we teach in Ironhack is actually digital products. But this doesn't really, it's not bordered by digital products. It can be for other products as well. So can anyone write down what they think like that user experience can improve? It doesn't have to be a digital product. It can be anything. I'm going to be looking at your chat on the other screen. So I would like to see if someone can give me an example of what kind of products can be improved by UX. Once again, it doesn't have to be customer journey. Customer journey is something that can be part of UX, but it's not a product. So retail, yes. Microwave, yeah, microwave can be improved. Your fridge, definitely. Services in general, really anything. Shopping, all. Relationships, not really. Maybe between the user and the product. Buying apartment, yes, if you use an app. ATM, public transportation, be specific. Car access, gardening tools, anything, really. So yes, you got it. Many things in digital and real world can be improved by UX. So let's see how, for example. This is something for elevator. Can someone write down what can we do better here? Or this is just perfect. You can also write, this is awesome, I understand everything. But if you have an idea, you can write down what can be improved here. So we have, obviously, it's something for the elevator, probably for calling the elevator. So we have two arrows, one is showing down, one is showing up. All right, so we have from Antonio, the relationship between the button for up and down. We can improve those. Put the damn arrows on the buttons. Yes, you can put arrows on the button. Change the designer. Okay, it's a little bit late for this. The buttons next to each other we have. Change the order. All right. So the more specific you are, it's easier for me to comment on what you're writing. So I see that arrow needs to be on the button. That would be an obvious solution. Yes, Ivan said, not sure which button to press. Exactly. And also not hygienic. Okay, so this is like a little bit from the pandemic era. So obviously, this can be improved. What about this one? It's a door. It's a door. It has handles and it says push. Just a door. How can we improve this? Should we improve this at all? I want some answers about what can we do better with the door. I never know what to do. Wrong signifier, exactly. So you're confused what to do. If you don't know what they're talking about, okay, so we have remove the handle. It's called the Norman door. Actually, already people know it. I don't know why you're here if you already know about Norman door. I'm joking. Talk to Don Norman. So yes, the obvious solution would be just remove the handles. Any other? Any other? Remove the handles if you need to push. Make it automatic. All right, different mechanism for push. Type of handle used. Okay, so we can have type of handle. So we have many ideas about how to improve this one. All right, let's go to the next example. All right, so we have one principle in UX, more options, more problems. Familiar with this? How can we improve these remote controls? Everyone was in contact with remote controls, and there's many buttons. Should there be so many buttons? All right, so if people are still writing about the door, I really like the remove the door. I like this. Less buttons, okay. Voice control. All right. Maybe a menu. Simplify. Simplify how? How do you simplify this? What does it mean, Google Home? We need to combine the similar functions. Interesting. Less buttons. 3 main buttons, others should be hidden. So obviously, the problem is we have a touch screen, voice control. All right. So, okay, so what do we have? With less buttons, you can access the menu. So like a video game controller, right, left, up, and down. No, but then if we have fewer buttons, we can have the opposite scenario. We can. All right, I'm asking you now to stop with your comments. So I'm going to just read the few last one. Maybe some sort of touch screen, like in touchpad in a laptop. That would really maybe improve, but like the price will go up of the remote control, right? It should still be a simple tool. Maybe we can do something like this. What do you think? Simplify, you know? Or someone already did it. So there's a super simple version of this. I don't know if any one of you used it. So basically, the point is like to leave the essentials that users are actually going to use, because there's so many buttons here that you never will use. I have remote controls all my life, and like there was always buttons I didn't use. It was just useless. So basically, yeah, solution would be just leave the essentials and make a menu, and the rest can be also connected to the TV. So one of you already commented something like it can be also counterproductive to do a simple version, because everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler, if you understand this notion. So it shouldn't be the simpler than as possible. You shouldn't simplify just for the simplification itself. You should simplify it more. You should simplify it at the edge of the simplification. All right, what can we do better here? What's the problem here? Is there any problem here? I have like a keep it simple, stupid principle. Exactly. Yeah, don't sacrifice options. That's why the design that's simplified has to be better. So in this example, what's the problem here? What can we do better here? It's some kind of a medicinal cream. All right, so it says do not use in your eyes. Terminology is too advanced. Wording, use an image. Not clear at all. Where can you use it? Too specific. Easier language, explain it easier. Simplify words, symbols, not for everyone. So yeah, basically it says use on skin, not on eyes. But a lot of people are not so well versed with Latin language that is usually used in medicinal services. So what we can do is actually speak human. You don't have to say topical or ophthalmic. You can simply write down use on skin, not in the eyes, right? So speak human, use the words your users use. And this is not just a principle for, not just a principle for like cream for medicinal purposes. It's also something that we use a lot in UX design for digital interfaces. So you will know a lot of interfaces that you can see like something's written on the button, you're confused, what's going on? Please just like write in the way that humans are gonna understand. What about here? What can we do here? How do we know the user is here? What do we do here? Is there anything wrong? Maybe nothing is wrong. People obviously found a way to do it. Signing. User testing before developing. Interesting. Make a path. Yeah, maybe you should make an additional part where actually users are going to use it. So you have two options. One is to keep wishing that users are not going to go across and plant new grass every spring, hoping that something is going to change. Or you can be smart about it and do something that Ohio State University did. So they obviously noticed that users are just going crisscrossing across the lawn. At one point, they decided like to make this a design. So they interpreted the wishes of the users and made it actually pretty, and useful and practical for the users. So this is what you can yeah, put a fence, remove it. Yeah. Plant beautiful flowers. That can be a solution. But yeah, I mean, maybe you should just redesign. This is the point. So if you think the design is expensive, you should look at the cost of bad design. I actually seen something very similar to this in person. It's completely preposterous. I mean, if you're not a male user of these, maybe you don't know how this works, but it's quite awkward, and I can tell you that you will not see two men standing next to each other like this. This is something that happens when you simply tell to the engineer, put two of these together in this room, and they will just do it. This can happen with digital product as well, or something like this. This really reminds me of some moments working with developers when it wasn't really specified well what they need to do. So basically, the person that executed this design did everything correctly. There's a handle and there's a lock. What's the problem? There's no problem. There's everything you asked them to do, they did. So to be able to evade all of these problems that are happening all the time around us, not just in digital realm, but also in the physical. But let's keep it to digital from now on. We only had these examples, so it can be kind of closer to you, from the real world. This is something that is also very common practice in UX design, like this connection to the real world. There's a lot of things in digital interfaces that actually we're using inspired by the actual real world, because this is something we're familiar with. So to be able to evade all of these or improve bad designs, we're going to do design thinking. So like before, maybe someone can try to explain what is design thinking very shortly. So don't write a sentence, few words. What can be design thinking? I see that a lot of you actually know about Norman doors. A lot of you know about like design, about users, and so on, about the details. Maybe one of you can actually try to put it. Empathy is part of it, but it cannot be explained. All right, thank you. It's process. It's a problem-solving process. Simply put, it's a process. It is, yeah, user-centric. It's a problem-solving process. It is user-centered. Yeah, you're thinking as a user. It's a method. It's actually a process. So we got it. Yeah, a process keeping the user in mind. So you got it. It's correct. It's a process. I don't know how many of you are designers, like from not UX designers or maybe even UX designers, but have experienced working without a process. I have. I was a designer for quite a while before having a proper process. I was a graphic designer for a long time. I was also an illustrator and also a bunch of like visual designs before I started designing digital interfaces and experiences. And I can tell you that when you design without a process, it's kind of All right, we said have fashion design, always uses a process. What kind of process you have in fashion design? So before design thinking process, I thought like, yeah, there is a process in design, like I get a task, I get specifics, I get a deadline, and then what happens then? It happens that actually you kind of struggle with believing there's some kind of a creative process that involves you being talented and you having experience and you being somehow hitting your head against the wall, and you will get to a result. There's always some kind of a process, but it's not well defined. So for years, myself and many other designers that I know, we would struggle, for a long time without really having like strict process that you follow that is actually helping you understand that there's no such a thing like talent. There's no such a thing as creativity, because there's no need to. You can simply think and you can simply follow a process. Of course, previous experiences and a natural tendency to like design or to like shaping things, maybe even drawing and painting and such things are going to be helpful. And this is why you are thinking about becoming a designer, usually because you have some kind of natural affinity for it. But once I was a strong believer in having a talent, and this is something that's crucial, and without talent, you cannot really, without talent, you kind of, yeah, I mean, what are you doing there? And after a while, I realized that talent is actually just like holding you back. Talent is making you rely too much on it. So without a strict process, something that's really helpful, you rely too much on talent and on your experiences, usually struggling negative experiences while getting a process. So, design thinking, super simple. What I do usually when I start a boot camp, I promise to the students that on Monday, I promise that on Friday they're going to present successful project without having any experience with design thinking process, without having any experience with designing, and that the only thing that they need to do is follow the process steps. So what we do is start with empathizing. Empathizing is like all the steps really crucial. And to be able to empathize, we need to do user research. We need to understand what are the pain points that the users have. We need to seek the stories of the users from their own words. So for this, we will use some tools like surveys, like interviews. We will observe the users. So while doing a survey, we will conduct something called quantitative method, because we're trying to find how much. We're trying to find the numbers, and we're trying to reach as many as possible people who are possible respondents. Then we usually want to kind of clarify some of the results that we have from the interviews. And this is when we actually go in depth and do a qualitative process, asking deeper questions, what the users might have a problem with, how we can identify their pain points. And we're going to observe them as well. We can simply observe users or even customers, how they're interacting with a product or a service, and write down and find kind of like the pain points from just observing them. After we empathize, after we do all of these, we need a way to define. So during the definition process, we will analyze the data. We will seek for patterns. So what it means seek patterns is like we are gonna seek for the emergent patterns of a trend, like that we can see that 60% of people actually are really strongly opinionated about a certain aspect of your product or a potential product. And we will see that like only 5% of people are doing this or that. So we'll kind of quantify also and trying to define the problem, but also we were trying to find the patterns from the interviews that we have. So for this, we will use also several tools. And you will see that in UX design, there's a lot of sticky notes and a lot of papers, actually. And what I like to do, especially in the this pandemic era where we're spending so much time in front of our computers, I'm constantly advising people and also my students that like you should do as many hand sketches and work that is kind of like getting you away from the computer, so we can save our eyes a little bit. So for this, we will do basically we will write down all the insights that we gather from surveys and interviews. So on each sticky note, we would write down things that we heard directly from people, from real people, and then we would paste them on the wall. This is affinity diagram. And there's going to be sometimes when you interview and survey many people, there's going to be a lot of insights, and there needs to be a way to organize all of these. So you would get all of these sticky notes and try to organize them in similar groups by affinity. After which you will give these groups labels, and this will guide you to understanding like what are the biggest pain points. So you will see some of the patterns emerging here. You will see how some of the real problems that you might not even have thought about, they're going to start emerging and popping out and starting to shape up the picture of where the problem lies. And when we have this, of course, we're doing this as a team. Like you can do this alone as a designer as well, but it's much more useful like to practice user-centered design and design thinking within a team. And unfortunately, like during the pandemic times, a lot of teams are not able to physically be with each other, but they're really wonderful tools for this, like Miro or Mural, that are really similar and competitors. Or if you're using Figma that is collaborative, you can like use all of these tools collaboratively online simultaneously. So after we do these affinity diagrams as a team, then we use something that's called the empathy map canvas. And there's several designs for this. This one particularly is by David Gray. You can find it online. It's easily downloadable. And it's a little goofy, but it's a really simple, nice tool because it's forcing you to answer just the questions, like what the users' goals are and how do we empathize more with them, and actually we want to see what they see, what they hear, what they think, what they do, and trying to understand deeper why and what their motivations are. And when we have this, we already have a lot of insight from the users, and this is enabling us to create statements. So we have like these problem statements that are human-centric. So we have problem statement, hypothesis statement, where we state basically something. You can basically find something like define a pain point, a certain pain point. And you can have several of these, after which a team is gonna go through them and vote for the best problem statements and hypothesis statements, like to guide them for the next steps. Next step is ideation. Actually, sorry about this. I forgot to mention, all of this is like leading us to make a persona. Persona is an artifact that is helping us design for the user and remind us of the pain points and the goals and motivations of a certain user group. And this persona is a collection of all of these insights and the problem statement and the motivation of the user. So once we kind of empathized and defined all of these insights and define the user persona that can be several. It can be from primary to tertiary persona. Then we can go finally into ideation. So before we come to ideation, we don't want to think about the solution. Before this, we really want to just focus on the problem. It's really easy to already have ideas, and usually a team gets a bunch of ideas, but it's smart to hold on, like to really push those ideas before you come to ideate, before you have really well-defined problem that you want to work on. So ideation is quite short, and it's about thinking outside the box, and it's about identifying possible solutions. Excuse me. You're not about to get solutions like when you get to ideation. It's not like the first solution that comes to mind, you should have this solution. Actually, there's many tools that we are using for this. And you can write these down, and you can Google them afterwards. You can find many resources for this online. So we would brainstorm. I think most of you heard about brainstorming. And this is basically when a team just throws a bunch of ideas and thinks about, like, this is like generating bunch of ideas. Then there's the Crazy Eight. It's a super simple tool also for the team, where you kind of like continue on the other's idea with drawing. This is round robin is again like with drawing within a team, and we have like best worst idea when you're specifically trying to think about a really bad idea with the goal of actually getting good ideas out of it. But like by trying to get a super bad idea, then you will actually, someone else is going to read it and it's going to be funny and it's going to trigger some new ideas, and you might get a really good idea from this. And after you do all of these ideas, people are going to vote with what we usually do with dot voting. So people are going to use like a certain amount of dots that they have, and you will see that people are actually voting for a certain idea after this that you will try to put into a prototype. So once we have empathized and defined the problem, and once we had a bunch of ideas, now it's time to try to put these ideas into a prototype. And the prototype should be quickly made, as quick as possible, so you can test them out and iterate and make a new one and iterate and try a different idea and discard, try a different idea and then accept, of course, based on the budget and based on the limitations of your resources in the team. So for prototyping, we usually start with hand-drawn prototypes. Hand-drawn prototypes are really the most budget-friendly prototype that you can make. As we go on to the digitized mid-fi and then to digital hi-fi, the process gets more and more expensive. So hand-drawn is something, if you want to do this, I would advise you to really do as much as possible, because this is the fastest way to get some of your ideas on the paper. And you can easily sketch out, like discard the papers, start a new one, draw over it, someone else can draw over it. You can like easily iterate on a bunch of stuff that you have there, because it takes less time. And once you have like those paper prototypes, and you can actually really make nice paper prototypes that you can even test with some users. After that, and only after that, you make a mid-fi prototype. Mid-fi prototype is something that doesn't have any branding, doesn't have any colors or typefaces and so on. It's just there for the content. The way you want to test, like if it's usable, if the user can actually accomplish a task that you want them to do. And you should also test this out, because then you go to a digital hi-fi which takes much longer. And if you have something really radical to change, it's going to take you much longer to change that than in mid-fi or low-fi. So the more hi-fi you get, it takes more time to make a change. And if you don't do prototypes and go directly to development, then it's going to be super expensive to make a change. So you should make as many prototypes and test out those prototypes as much as you can. Testing prototypes is something that this is the final stage. You're testing your product, you're testing your idea, and you're testing it with a prototype. So prototype is your artifact that actually users can interact with. Users don't know about empathize. They don't know about definition or ideation. What they know is what you show them. It's a prototype, and you tell them to accomplish a task. After they accomplish a task, while they're doing this, you will try to see how they're interacting. So you can give them a prototype and give them a usability test. You can try to determine if it's usable or not. And you can do this remotely or in person. You can do this moderated or unmoderated. So you can basically, look over the shoulder of someone that's using the product and see like how they're interacting, what it can be, what the problems are, where their blockers are, why they cannot accomplish the task. And then you write all of this down and you go back to your prototype and try to recover from this problem and iterate and then test it again and see if it's working. So the most expensive user and usability testing is when you ship your product. If you're testing with as many as possible users before you actually develop a product, it's going to be way, way more economical than testing an existing product. And maybe most importantly, something very important to mention is that design thinking is not a linear process. Someone I saw mentioned agile. Design thinking goes very well along with agile. Agile is a methodology made by engineers, and it's also a philosophy that is based on iteration. It's based on having sprints, and it's based like shipping products, testing products, iterating, shipping, testing. So it goes very well with like design thinking is like really compatible with this. So in design thinking is like this as well. You can test and you can go back to define. You can go back to empathize. Like if you maybe you find out that actually you skipped something really important that you only found out with the usability test of your prototype, and then you go back to empathize and redefine. So you do everything you can before you actually ship the product that's going to be online and people are going to use, because it can be a disastrously bad product if you don't test it out, if you don't do a prototype, if you don't do empathize and define. You're basically doing this blindly. Yeah, I see someone commented, fail early. Yes, fail often and early. Like test as soon as you have something to test, because it's going to teach you what you can iterate, and then going further into the definition, you get better and better. So do we have any questions so far about? So we talked about UX design, and I talked about design thinking and about the stages of design thinking. So and I told you in the beginning that it's a really basically simple kind of, it's a hard-working process, but it's really simple to follow actually, and it's easy to also teach people, and it's easy to fall in love with because you get so many results. Like it's really helping you. You don't have to like hit your head against the wall. You just have to follow the steps, and in the end, you will have a result. And maybe the result is not going to be great, but you test it out, and you're going to go back and do it all over again. So the principle also, what we're doing in Ironhack, is that we are working on as many projects as possible. So we are having like around 7 projects per bootcamp, 6 or 7, depending. And in each of these projects, we are repeating the whole process of design thinking, and each time we're introducing new tools, and by repeating this, like, you're really learning how this is going. And then once you get a job as a UX designer, you're getting better and better at this skill. You're understanding it in more depth and so on. So, does anyone have a question? I'm waiting for someone to write down. Do we have some comments?
We have some questions on our box here. For example, Tayezi, I think it's Tayezi. If anything can benefit from design thinking, how come it's only UX or digital products that it's associated with it?
It's a good question. It's because it's really made for the digital products. It was made by people who are working in digital realm. There's a lot of people who are claiming that you can use design thinking process for anything. It's not really true. You cannot use it for anything. It has to be compatible with the problem. You can use design thinking process to help you understand and define a problem with anything, but it might not be the best thing to do. So the simple answer is, like, because it was created by people who are working in the digital ecosystem, and it's really compatible with this. It's compatible because, as I said, it goes along with Agile, it goes along with testing and iterating all the time. It doesn't go along well with many other products that actually we are going to talk about further. We have a comment that says, have used it before to design menus of a restaurant. You can definitely use it to design a menu of a restaurant. So another reason why it's really used mostly in digital ecosystem is because, like, development of digital products costs a lot. And you really want to, as I said, like, really test out as much as you can before you actually ship it to developers to spend expensive hours developing your designs. For example, if you're making a menu for a restaurant, you can actually have a menu of a restaurant printed out and then collect user experiences, and then you can reprint. It's not going to cost you that much. Like, you don't have to make a prototype and test it. You can. It's going to be still cheaper. But what I want to say simply is that, like, it has the more value, the more expensive the development is, the more value the design thinking and user-centered design have.
Milo, we have another question, kids. I always hear about UX designers, but as far as I know, the UX team has writers, researchers, lots of other roles. Why are bootcamps only focused on designing? Should, in fact, a designer be a writer and
design
a researcher as well?
Research is design. Research is part of design. So what we talked about here, user experience design is based on research. So what we're doing with Empathize and Define is doing research. We're gathering insights from real users. So this is the research part of the design. So it's all designing. Like, design doesn't mean picking up nice colors and typefaces. So don't mix it with graphic design or art. There is graphic design, part of UI, so user interface design, that's part of UX UI, that's part of overall overarching discipline of UX design. So there is beauty and there is aesthetics in UX design, but it's just part of it. It's not the main goal, it's not the main reason. So this is why it was quite compatible for me to go into UX and UI, because I was someone that was already a graphic designer. So kind of like it was related to me. It's still a huge learning process, but it was related. And I had an interest for this. I hope I answered this. So shortly to answer, we are teaching research. We are not teaching writing because this is a different discipline, although it is part of a team that is working on digital products, and it's called UX writing. It's kind of like copywriting, in marketing, in advertising, but focused on actually digital products. All right, so she was Alex, or he, I don't know, sorry. Meaning in the creation of the actual dishes. Yeah, sure. I thought like the menu was like, yeah, sure. It can be used. I would really like to see. I don't know if you have any documentation about this or like an article written on this. To be interesting to see how design thinking process was used for this. All right, so let's move on. I wanted to talk a little bit about other things. So yeah, why don't we just design the screens and send to developers? I think I already answered this. Because it's simply not rational. It's simply expensive and not practical. We need to test out. We need to see all the glitches. We need to test out as much as we can before we send to developers who are really, really hardworking and expensive. And also, we are making their lives easier because like if we have everything really set, they're just going to have a smoother experience and it's going to be nicer for everyone. But more importantly is about the resources. It's about the time management. So there's no UX design without user-centered design. User-centered design and user experience and design thinking go along, like they're together. They cannot exist basically without each other. But before there was user-centered design, there was something else. And so there was an evolution. Before we got to agile, before we got to design thinking, there were other processes out there. And at one point, people started thinking about like, okay, maybe we can improve the process. Maybe we can connect this and that. And then in the era of internet, kind of developers and designers started collaborating and sharing ideas. And this is when design thinking was basically started to be used, like during the 80s, but mostly during the 90s. But before that, in the 19th century, we had manufacturer-centered design. So during this, it was not about the user. It was about making as much as possible, producing as much as possible, reducing costs, but like make it. There was technology that emerged and made it possible, the electricity and the internal combustion engine, and it was just like it made possible this that we get into manufacture, like to industrially produce a lot of products. I don't know if anyone of you knows this film. If you do, maybe you can comment for others. It's a famous film by Charlie Chaplin, and still funny, if you ask me. And it was about manufacturing in factories at the beginning of the 20th century. So if you know which movie it is, please comment. After this, in like first half of 20th century and like middle century, we had product-centered design. So it was not about like producing as much of the product, but like improving the actual product. So we really wanted to see how the product works and the more function it has, like which are the functions that need to be done. But this was still not user-centered. It was centered on the product, like what the product needs to have, what are the characteristics of the product. Only in the late 20th century, like the second half, designers started understanding like that users need to be put in the center of design. You needed to interact with users. You needed to understand users' needs, their motivations and desires to be able to design well for them. So it wasn't just about how much and how well the product is made or beautiful or how many functions it has. They started to understand that actually you need to cater, you need to understand who's going to use it and if it's usable and if it's useful for the people you're designing it for. So, and also that design is iterative. So we mentioned already agile. You should look it up. This is not part of this lecture, but it's part of modern way to design. So this iterative process in Agile that goes so well with designing products. I'm sorry, I forgot what I wanted. I wanted to make a point because I made a connection. And yeah, maybe I'm gonna think, or excuse me for this. I had like a brain fart, if you can excuse my language. All right, so we said at one point we came to this user-centered design after, yeah, sorry, I remember. So there's two distinct methodologies in how you can accomplish certain tasks. So methods. So there was like a waterfall method, which meant that while you're producing a product like a car or in some really massively produced industrial product, they still sometimes use this waterfall method. It means like that you first do one step and then the other and then the other and then the other. And so each step is really depending on the previous step. And then the end step is final product that you launch and sell. So there's no iteration, there's no changing. So this is one of the really important differences between how it used to be and how it can be now, and a lot of people are using now this iterative process. So how do we accomplish user-centered design? I already said it. Yeah, someone just said waterfall lacks flexibility. Thank you. No emoji for brain fart. So how do we accomplish this user-centered design? By doing user research. We cannot do user-centered design without actually researching the users. So this is the part that someone was asking about, like user experience design. The core of user experience design is research. Why do we do it? Why do we do this research? Can anyone answer quickly? Why do we do research? Why don't we just build stuff and then see how it goes? I'm going to hurry this up since I saw the time. I'm going to answer this for you. It's because you're not your user. It's really easy as a designer and a business owner to get into this, like, I know what they need. I'm using this product. I think I know what needs to be done. Let's do this. This is a common mistake you will see, especially as a designer. It's a huge struggle with kind of trying to persuade business owners, stakeholders, the clients, that you need to do user research. When you say user research, for some people, it's like, oof, they think they're gonna pay a lot of money for nothing because user research is not visible, So a lot of people tend to just like do stuff without really understanding the users. So first thing you need to understand for user research is you are not your user. So when I asked you, how would you solve this problem before, and many of you had ideas, actually none of your answers were correct because you didn't do any user research. You didn't think about who's going to use this. You need to think about like, okay, so are these doors actually can be pushed or pulled? Or maybe someone doesn't speak English and you wrote push, because a lot of really commonly, and don't feel bad about this, I do this all the time, and most people say just remove the handles. But what if there's a person that doesn't know what it says? Maybe they don't know English. They will not know what to do. They will be confused. How do I open the door? Or maybe there's a person that is in wheelchair and they cannot, get those handles, or there's maybe a super tall person and for them is like, so there's always, you have to think about who's going to use this. You cannot just like throw ideas out there and try to solve it. You actually need to use user research. I know this is kind of like a simplified example, but I just wanted to illustrate how easy it is to jump to conclusions and find the solution immediately without really understanding the use the needs of people who are going to use this. So you also, not just who are they, but also where this is. Is this an apartment building? Is this a hospital? Like you need to know many information here to be able to actually improve this design. So once again, you're not your users. We do it because it prevents us designing for ourselves. It prevents us remove incorrect assumptions. Of course, when you start, you have an assumption. You start with some kind of an idea that roughly sometimes what you want to do. But then you want to test these assumptions. You really want to be straight with yourself and find out the truth. And you want to remove the personal preferences for the design. For example, I like this color, or I like this typeface, or I like this image. It shouldn't be about liking stuff. It should be based always on data that you gathered with user research. This is going to save you a lot of money, and this is saving a lot of money to business owners. My personal goal is to talk about this as much as I can to as many business people that I can, and maybe also through the language of the business people, to help them understand that we can help them, and we can help them save money, we can help them reduce costs, we can help them improve profit, we can help them stop doing something that's going to be useless. Like this, we can help them avoid Segway. I don't know how many of you know, I mean, most of you probably know about Segways, but it was founded by a really brilliant engineer that had already a lot of success designing medical devices, and he found a way like to make this weird technology of like balancing when you're standing on these two wheels. There's a super intuitive technology that you can move around by just leaning back in front and like stopping by leaning backwards, and like it's so intuitive. Like he made this like breakthrough of technology, and then basically he said that it would be to a car what the car was to a horse and buggy. Jeff Bezos said it's going to be bigger than internet. People who are involved in the process, they thought it's going to replace cars in 10 years. What happened? What happened? Why don't we all have Segways now? Why didn't this replace cars? Because they didn't do user research. Because that was a guy that had already a lot of success, and he thought, yeah, this is a genius thing. Everyone is going to use it. I use it a lot. I love it. Everyone is going to use it. I think this is going to be a hit. And what happened is like that he was not correct. Because how can this replace a car? This is not weatherproof. You cannot ride this through a thunderstorm. You're going to be wet. There's no infrastructure for this. You cannot charge this wherever you go. You cannot just leave it anywhere. It's actually not safe. And there is something ironic happened that the CEO of Segway actually died on a Segway. True story. CEO of Segway died falling off a cliff while being on a Segway, trying to evade a jogger with a dog. You can check it. It's true. So a product that was invested billions into development turned out that it has a little use today. It has a bit of a use like in promotion and some specific like use in warehouses and so on, but it proved like to be super non-necessary. There was not a market need for this. So if they did any user research, they would not even make it. I like this example, for example. You can on the left, you can see things on the website, on a university website, actually there, and on the right, what people are looking for. And the only thing it has in common is full name of the school. But this is really common when you see like a business owner. They want to put everything there. Like they want to show everything they have. They want to like brag. They invested in this. They invested in that. They have this. They have that. But users actually want to accomplish a task, or they want to find information. This is something that you need to be aware of. People are still not aware of the user needs, and this is happening a lot. And this needs to stop or to be reduced. So I hope that this is gonna improve. So basically, this UX research is about being aware of your user expectations. It's about looking and finding these patterns that indicate users' models that we can make, these personas that we use, that help us during the design decisions in the process. And about these mental models, actually. So what are these people doing? I wanted just to illustrate a point. Can someone answer me? What are these people doing? Simple, just what they're doing. Crossing the road, exactly. What are these people doing? As simply as possible. Mimicking the Beatles, exactly. So you can say, without really observing and thinking about the context, you can say that both of these groups of people, they're crossing the street, but actually these are posing for a photo. So it's quite different what they do. Maybe physically they're doing the same thing, but their motivation and their goal is very different. So this is where we need to understand the context of the user. And it can be really easily misinterpreted what the users want and want to do. You really need to dig deep into this. This is what they want. They're crossing the Abbey Road. They're not crossing just any street. They're crossing the street from the famous cover of the Beatles album. So being aware of the context is the key. You cannot just like think about a solution that's isolated. When should we do research? We do research at the beginning, in the empathize and define state, but actually we can do it in every stage. If we find out that the previous stage was not done well, we can iterate this stage and we can constantly do additional user research. As I mentioned briefly, there is some obstacles, and usually these are the cultural reluctances in a business because they don't really see the value of doing research and the value of good design. Sometimes there really is not enough money, and you can do just small research or not any research at all. Sometimes you don't have the access to users. There can be like a super specific thing that you're designing that there's really a small number of people, maybe something for the medical services, like a scanner or something like, and you don't have you don't have access to them. And limitation can also be a challenge that you don't have skilled researchers to do this. So in the end, they might have done a lot of research, but they didn't really do it well. They didn't define it well. They didn't find the pain points and the problem. They didn't define the problems well. So in short, if you're not involving your users, you're not practicing a user-centered design. And if you're not doing this, you're not designing a good design user experience. So user experience without user-centered design doesn't exist. User-centered design doesn't exist without doing research. As simple as that. Just want to show you just a little bit before we finish. I see some people are going, but just to show you what the research process is about. So there's some methods. This is a landscape of methods, like there's many. Basically, they go from like on one side you go to like a deeper knowledge, and on one side you go to more descriptive knowledge. Or you can form it as you can split it in generative or evaluative. So generative, like when you're generating idea, and evaluative when you're evaluating like what data you gather from generating research insights that we've already mentioned. So you cannot say something is true. Once again, you're not your user. So if you're not, your opinions are not absolute truth, and this can be a huge problem with the stakeholders, with the business people, but also with designers. Sometimes we are pushing to do this not based on data, but on our personal preferences that are always biased. So if you are going to do this, remember, always start with the data. Always try to get the data from research and exclude your biases. All right, we got to the end. Whew. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. I'm going to share the screen once again, and I'm going to just a second. Chrome tab. I'm going to go quickly because someone asked for this screen. But you can also Google this. You can find this online easily. This landscape of user research methods. I'm going to give you a moment to take a screenshot. And another one where you can see that there's not just like from one side deeper knowledge and more descriptive, but also there's a difference between, you can see on top, behavioral and attitudinal. There's a difference between these two. And you can also split them in qualitative and quantitative research. So you're choosing these based on your product or your project, based on the resources you have. So these are kind of like your two limitations that you have before you choose a certain research method, because some of these research methods are expensive. So, and you can only ask people. So doing surveys and interviews is quite economical. I really hope that you learned a lot. I see there's some really nice comments here. I wish that this can be more like an interactive thing, that we can talk more and longer, but like, yeah, I understand that your time is limited. So I really hope that this is going to be done in 1 hour, which we managed to do. And thank you for all of your questions. There are some really nice comments and questions. We still can have some questions if you want.
Yep. Just one thing, because I feel like Rafa told me he was replying to the ones he could during the webinar, and the ones that were not like really long to talk about. So there are some questions that have been upvoted that maybe we can discuss, like 2 or 3 of them. So the first one is, if you're interested in designing physical journeys or experiences, what are the specifics you should learn?
So if you want to design, there's a tool called Customer Journey Map that is used not just by UX design, but also by marketing and product design. So you can Google this Customer Journey Map, but you cannot just do it isolated. You need to do it based on the research that you gathered, because you need to really empathize. You need to find the motivation of your persona. So this artifact that I mentioned, this persona artifact, is crucial for your designs. You're externalizing all of these information that you gather during empathize and define. So if I understood the question correctly, a specific tool for this would be customer journey map or user journey map and storyboards to help you like determine like the steps that the user is going to take to accomplish a certain goal, and also to empathize with them, like to see where they are on this journey. You know, like when is a good moment to for them to use your product or service. I hope that I answered your question, if I understood it correctly.
Cool. Is it possible to Is it possible to work at the design thinking process alone without a team?
Yes, it is possible. I already mentioned it's much more valuable when you have a team, because the team is gonna make sure that you're not designing for yourself. So when I said like you're not your user, of course that you're gonna still have your personal preferences and biases, but you want to eliminate as much as you can, so the team members can eliminate this further. It doesn't mean that it cannot be a good design thinking process if you do it alone. It can still be very useful when you do it alone.
Cool. Let's do one more. So since the beginning until the prototype phase, how much time on average should we dedicate?
Yeah, I cannot answer this. It's not possible to answer. As much as you can. But you should time limit, there's something called a roadmap before you do every project. And during this project, before you do a roadmap, you need to consider how much time you have, what your resources are, what needs to be done. And then during this roadmap, you will say, okay, so I need to do this, and that. And these I'm going to do on Monday, these I'm going to do on Tuesday, and these I'm going to do on Wednesday. And you really try to stick to these. Like you should set yourself like these time limited phases for your design. So, but always the more research, the more the prototyping you do, the better it is going to be. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thank everyone for the questions. I think most of them were already replied by Milan, but if not, just join in another webinar. We went a little bit over the 1 hour mark, so I'm sure everyone has other things they want to do. But thank you so much for attending today. Thank you for the class, Milan and Rafael, and thank you for replying all the questions. I hope you have enjoyed it. And just as a reminder, this webinar is recorded, and you can access to it once we finish, just by clicking in the same URL that you access to go to this webinar. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a nice week.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.